Hi everyone, Sandman here. This video is brought to you by a donation from Dario from Spain. All he said was keep up the good work and Happy New Year, so I guess that allows me to talk about whatever I want. I found a thread on MGTOW.com called Info from Very Old Bachelors. One guy there posted that he has an older lifelong bachelor friend for many decades, and he breaks down the differences between going your own way back then versus today, and I found it rather fascinating. The old-timer says that in the past, bachelors cope with shaming language by deflecting it and choosing not to talk about their lives. If people questioned them as to why they were still single, they would often say that life is great because of all the beautiful women that they got a chance to date. He also said that no one would badmouth a guy that's a gentleman and kept his mouth shut and didn't badmouth anyone. Personally, I don't believe that entirely, and I think it's a bit of a naive way to see things because it's obvious that women would gossip behind his back and shame him without his knowledge and probably call the guy gay if he wasn't actually seen dating any women. The elderly bachelor also said that the red pill rage or red pill awareness phase is something that guys do for a few years and then he moves on with his life and starts to focus on himself, but that the deprogramming time from the culture around us takes a while. He also says that the MGTOW philosophy might be making some big mistakes by having guys hang around longer than they should instead of moving on with their lives. He also says that at some stage, once all of this knowledge is set in, then you basically see yourself as a kid that basically gets to play hooky. All those beta husbands are hating life and time passes, and their wives hate the life entrapment too. That's something really interesting because I've often spoken about men getting tired of relationships, of being a plow horse, but I rarely think about women getting tired of those relationships as well. People will apparently try to entrap you if you focus on others, so you need to focus more on yourself. The younger man going his own way was talking to the old-timer and said that at a Christmas party he was at recently, he was being questioned by women with regards to why he was still single. That basically got him to blow up, and he said that there was no way he was going to be a slave to a woman and spend life in servitude to a man-hating woman. The old-timer once again said he should have just said no thank you, like when someone's passing around a joint at a party, because if a guy stays happy and factual, he can't be manipulated as easily because obviously the woman doesn't know that she's actually pushing his emotional buttons. Apparently there's also talk of the MANPIPHANY in this particular thread. Apparently, according to the old guy, a MANPIPHANY is just because a man is on the MGTOW road and removing women from his life does not mean he has to be mean and nasty or rude about it. Then the old-timer was asked why he felt angry, and this is what he has to say, and I quote, "You're angry because you were actually never given a chance by society. Mom dressed you up in a little suit, and at the church door you held the door for all the little ladies, and you felt like a sap. But you were being programmed as soon as you could stand. That is what the women will never understand. We keep at MGTOW as we are deprogramming from the gynocracy. No more, it takes time, so when we actually change our behavior, if we get anger, resentment, and foul language around our MGTOW, it's not really being free." Unquote. Many of you will probably remember how angry I was when I first fully digested the red pill and started my channel. It took me about a year and a half to stop being angry with women in general, and angry that no one actually told me about female nature. The old-timer believes that when you clean up your language and you stop being angry, then you cleanse your soul and you become classy, and only then are you truly free. He also mentions how he actually feels like the cat who ate the canary. He sits around at parties sometimes and a single lady or widow will often hit on him. But he stays nice and tells them politely no. His additional advice when rejecting women is to focus on how busy you are with other things in your life. Because women take rejection very poorly and they could easily get offended and take it personally. He says to talk about your work or music or something else. But in my experience, I don't think that's really enough because women take rejection personally even if it's not about them. If you reject them, you're saying that your work is more important than them. That you would rather be doing something like working, which isn't all that much fun, to women rather than hanging out with them. In a way, that's a bigger insult. I've always found that the best way to get rid of a woman is just to ignore her. That's the way that women get rid of men that they don't like, by giving them the cold shoulder, and they understand that type of behavior the best. He also said that life is about balance, and that as a man going his own way gets older or becomes a full-time bachelor, your goal shouldn't be what I assume is a social leper. The old-timer also had a warning with regards to women of the near future. Here's his quote, "They will be very pissed off, the older women that never married. With no kids, they'll mostly be unhappy creatures, or the most delightful to have coffee with. There is no in-between. Interesting how the mind always goes binary. Hot, cold, happy, sad." Unquote. And that line is very real. You're either an optimist or a pessimist. You're either mean and nasty or you're pleasant and happy. He says that you should also keep your life as private as possible because society will never understand bachelorhood fully because it's constantly trying to enslave everyone. That's where I disagree. When we have sex robots and or artificial wombs, that's when I suspect that suddenly no one will want to be a slave to another person unless perhaps that person is their own child. He does, however, say something very interesting, and I tend to agree with what he says with regards to traveling. And he says to do it alone, and he did it that way, otherwise it's going to be terrible. He says there are too many concessions to the schedule and you can't really do what you want to do. That's something I also agree with completely. Even though it was great to have a companionship on my travels in the past, the problem was my ex would always want to spend more time sleeping in and take her time shopping in gift shops or just sitting around in restaurants wasting time. The old-timer says that in life other people slow you down, and I agree with that completely, because you're having to make concessions constantly for other people and you can't live up to your own potential. You're stuck in slow because the person you're with can't keep up with you, or you're the one slowing someone else down without even realizing it. The old school MGTOW also shared some experiences about sitting in church and how he was shamed about male duty to have a family and raise children. He shared with the interviewer what had happened, and it seems that many of the single women there tried to enslave him, the eternal bachelor. So he ended up sleeping with all of these women, and then when he ran out of women to sleep with, he would just go to another church and start the process all over again. So much of the time I've discussed how so-called good Christian women seek to enslave men, but never did I think you could actually turn something like that to your advantage and use it to basically bed all of them. This guy played them like a boss. So maybe church is a great place to meet women after all for pump and dump, if that's what you're really looking for. After all, churches accept new members all the time, so it makes perfect sense. Then our eternal bachelor was asked if he has any regrets in life, and he says just one, that he wishes he'd moved around more every 2 years or so, and that he had traveled light. But instead he got himself stuck with a great job and he traveled heavily with tons of clothing and material possessions, I guess. I know exactly what he means by this regret, and that's why I plan in the next 1 or 2 years to basically start traveling and living for a month or two at a time in a new city, and thus experiencing something new all of the time. That means traveling light and getting rid of most of my possessions, and I have no problems doing any of that today. Another thing that came up in the discussion was the lie that married men live longer. He said that an extra 25 hours between work and family obligations will wear you down, and that's why many family men die in their 50s and 60s, and that the idea of the married man living longer is an absolute lie. And just to give everyone an update, Rudy, the oldest MGTOW I know, is not doing all that well. But he made it well into his 90s, and he told me that the reason for that was because he never got married. Also, he looked after his health, and because of that, he made it into his mid-90s. They often say that as you get older, you yearn to be closer to people, but I think that's a lie told to blue pill men by women. I find that most elderly people just want to be left alone to relax and do the things that they want to do, and they don't want to be predisposed to doing things their wives want them to do instead. How can you really enjoy retirement when you're basically being nagged to death? They say that most retired men die about a year or two after they stop working, because they become depressed and lose purpose in their life. I would say that's not it at all. If they retire and they're stuck at home with their wife all day, what do you think's going to happen? It's going to be a non-stop nagathon. She's going to nag the guy to death trying to micromanage him. The only alternative many of these guys have is simply to eat or drink themselves to death. I agree with the old-timer to focus on yourself, and according to the chat he had with the younger MGTOW, he says that we're on the right track, but that we just need to drop the negativity and focus on ourselves after we've gotten through the red pill rage and gotten it out of our system. Another thing that I've noticed about old school bachelors is that because they don't spend their time raising kids and dealing with the wife, they also tend to stay active much longer in life. They ride around on their bikes or they walk and have generally low to medium intensity exercise to keep their bodies in good shape. They also tend to devote their time to proper nutrition and hygiene and live a lot longer than those that are basically cutting corners. On top of that, they tend to have better mental health and less stress, so their hearts are also in better shape. The statistics that say that married men live longer than single men are skewed to reflect the men that die while they're still married. The men that are divorced live shorter lives than the men that either never married in the first place or stayed married until they died, so that tends to dramatically skew the statistics. There's also an article that came out recently called, "Could Getting Married Save Your Life?" Women are far less likely to die from heart disease if they have a partner, researchers claim. MGTOW 101 first brought this up, and it's clear that without a woman in a man's life to make it easier, it's more stressful, so they will do more on their own, and as a result, the bachelorette lifestyle might not be that good for women after all. That statistic is true for modern women, often working into their 60s and 70s, with no options to retire because they don't have a man to be fiscally responsible for them. Single unmarried bachelors are obviously less likely to have stress in their lives because they tend to have more surplus resources, and it takes them less effort to do things. But for women, it's obvious that they build up their assets far slower, so it's obvious that if they're actually stressed for money, they will basically be dying a lot sooner. Here in Canada, many women seem to have found a solution to this problem. They get jobs as teachers, and that means they get close to $100,000 a year to become glorified babysitters. That allows them to be single for life, and a teacher's pension is bulletproof, and it forces them to save money they otherwise would spend. The reality for men is far different, because it's the industrial and manufacturing jobs that have made men successful bachelors, even with low educations, that appear to be scarcer than ever before. As for the old-time bachelors, they had it good back in the 60s and 70s, when jobs were plentiful, and a man working on his own could support an entire family. Just imagine the lifestyle a single man could enjoy today with that type of salary when it was equivalent to 2 or more people working. He could pretty much buy a lot more things, and there were a lot less things to buy in general. Life back then would have been really grand. Anyways, that's all I've got to say for today. Thanks again, Dario from Spain, for your donation, and I hope you enjoyed this topic. Don't forget to check out the MGTOW mystery link, and also like this video. As for everyone else out there, please follow me on Twitter or like me on Facebook to get tomorrow's video today. Thanks for taking your daily dose of red pills. And remember, a red pill a day keeps the single church ladies away. So enjoy the rest of your day, and cheers.